Thank you, Pixel, for this opportunity. And it's nice to be here again in Florence and meeting old friends and making new friends. I shall be speaking about what future for language teaching and learning. My idea is to set you thinking, set the ball rolling for the conference. I had a quick look at the conference program over the past days, and I realized that there are many interesting topics which will speak about the future of language teaching and learning. Okay, so once a man called Charles Darwin said that it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. And I think that this is very true in language teaching and learning. We have gone over the past couple of years through so many changes, so many challenges in language teaching and learning. And I firmly believe that if we are not, or if we are not responsive to change, and if we are not going to be responsive to change, we will not survive. And this, as we will see now in the coming minutes, is extremely important if we want to still be relevant in today's world. Unfortunately, very often, one of the main problems with language teaching and learning is that students don't consider language teaching as relevant, especially when compared to other subjects. Now, this is very, very important because we need to be relevant. What we present in class to our students needs to be extremely relevant. Sorry. When we speak about change, we have to look first at the past, see where we are, and then think about the future. And if we were to have a look, a very brief look at how things changed over the past years, there were some radical changes that took place in language teaching and learning. I remember until a couple of years ago, many language educators arguing that online lessons can never replace in-person lessons in language teaching and learning. When COVID-19 became a reality, all language educators had to change their views. It was do or die. We either move on to online teaching or else no language teaching can take place. And this has brought about with it several challenges. Although most schools embraced this reality, it doesn't mean that there were no problems, no challenges, or it doesn't mean that there are still no more challenges that we have to face. We have seen along these past 2 years a very positive development where online teaching and learning, of languages is concerned, with many distance learning solutions. They started growing like mushrooms. Every day we find new apps, new programs, new platforms that had the scope of helping us reach our students, helping students learn better languages. Another important aspect is that the essential role of the teachers was highlighted. Unfortunately, very often, language educators were taken for granted. With the onset of the pandemic, many people changed their minds. They started appreciating much more the role of language educators. Now, obviously, as happens when there are changes going on, even these changes have created both excitement on one hand, excitement about new methods of teaching, new approaches to teaching languages, but also worrying factors. And my idea here is to speak about some aspects which I am sure we will discuss in depth during this conference. So I will not give any answers in my opening speech. I will just set the ball rolling and mention some of the most important aspects that we will be speaking about during this conference. So the question is, what will language education look like in the future? How will the core of language learning change? Or rather, how is it changing? Because change has already started. As Elisabetta said in her introduction, we were obliged to change. We had no other choice. Now, how will the core of language learning change? What role will technology have in the future of language learning? Will it take over completely? Will we go back in a couple of years' time to traditional methods of teaching combined with technology issues? Can technology guarantee language fluency and competency? Because very often we had crisis management. We needed to find new methods of teaching, new modes of teaching, new approaches. We found some platforms or apps that worked well in class, but can such technology guarantee language fluency and competency? Will translation technology make language learning useless? Today we speak about language translation technology. Will it take over in the future? Will schools adopt new language learning measures? Okay, so we have new apps, we have new platforms, we have technology, but were schools or are schools ready for these changes? Are our language classrooms ready to embrace all these changes in such a short period of time? And are educators and students ready and willing for change? Very often we hear language teachers, educators speak about fatigue reform. So many changes taking place over the last years. And I think they are right. But what is the other option? Can we not change? If we stop changing, we become obsolete. We become irrelevant. So, are educators and students ready and willing for these changes? Now, what is sure is that language education today is a mix of methods, a mix of approaches. We speak about multimodality. We speak about hybrid modality. We're living it today in this conference. Digital platforms, technological tools, apps. These are just some of the most common apps used for language teaching and learning. But it doesn't mean that these have solved our problems or totally solved our problems. In fact, there are many issues which we need to discuss together. First of all, does the educator know how to make the best use of such resources? Have we had enough training as language educators to make the best use of such apps, of such platforms? Or was it just we found an app, we tried it quickly with our friends or with our colleagues, and then put it in action in class? Is there adequate technical support in schools and in classrooms? And with technical support, I am not just meaning internet and good connectivity, but technical support is the know-how, the practicalities of using these apps in the best possible manner. Are language classrooms adequately equipped? We know that in many countries, with the onset of the pandemic, there were measures that had to be taken in classrooms and in schools where we had to limit the number of students in class. We had to have more spacing available. So we had to remove certain even resources from the classrooms. So are our language classrooms equipped for these changes? Is good quality training given to train educators for these new situations? What type of training are we giving our newly qualified teachers to be able to apply these new methods and approaches of language teaching and learning? Even we ourselves, what good quality training did we get to be able to, first of all, forward our messages to our students, but also to be able to use them? What about disadvantaged learners? Do these apps, do these approaches help disadvantaged learners? Or are they falling on the wayside? Has all this any implications on our assessment strategies? Okay, so we're using technology, we're using apps. What about assessment strategies? We all know that unfortunately, assessment boards are very often traditional in nature. So is our assessment procedures changing hand in hand with all these new changes and developments in language education? If not, I can see many problems. Is it more or less stressful, more or less frustrating, more or less impersonal for the learner and for the teacher? I mean, I can give a million lessons online, but I can assure you that when it is a face-to-face lesson, I can pass on the message in a more efficient manner. I can build relationships with my students much more than over the net. I'm not saying that internet and technology is not important, but I firmly believe, and this is a personal note here, I personally believe that online technology can never replace face-to-face teaching, especially in language learning. Are syllabi, programs of study, still adequate and relevant in view of these changes? Okay, so we have changed our methods of teaching, but have we changed our syllabi? Have we changed our programs of study? Or are we simply trying to adopt and adapt them to these scenarios? And what are the advantages or disadvantages of all this? As I said, I don't have the time to speak about all these issues, but I am sure that throughout this conference, we will have the time to delve into these issues in more depth. I think that unless we do face these questions, ask these questions, discuss them, and try to find a solution or the best possible solutions, I'm afraid that we might have to revert back to only face-to-face teaching because of problems that will occur. One final note. Challenges. I think that there are four main challenges that as language educators we have to change, we have to face with our students. First of all, multilingualism versus monolingualism. And with monolingualism here, I am not referring to students speaking only one language. I am referring to a lot of young people who think only in one way, and that is the social media way. And that can be very challenging in class, making students think differently. Another challenge is keeping the pace with language change. Up till a few years ago, we say that languages are alive, and I believe that. But until a few years ago, languages changed very slowly. New words needed a generation to become part of the language. Today, all you have to do is put a phrase, a word on social media, and in less than a day, it will become part of everyday speech. We can take some examples. For example, Brexit. Nobody spoke about Brexit up to, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. COVIDiots they call them, or COVID babies. These are just very maybe silly examples, but language is changing at an extremely rapid pace. Put a word on TikTok, on social media, and it becomes part of everyday language. And we as educators have to keep up with the pace of change. Exposure to the various varieties of language. Which type of language do we want to teach our students? Is it the textbook type of language, or the everyday language spoken in streets, on buses, in the underground, all around us, on social media? It's not the first time that we hear students tell us, but when shall we use these expressions? Well, sir, when shall we write a letter? Sometimes we ask our students to write a letter. Very often students say, but when will we ever write a letter? Most of our youngsters have never written a letter in their lives. They only write emails or WhatsApp messages. And assessment procedures. And as I said, if assessment procedures will not change in line with all the changes happening around us, then we will have to face even more difficulties when it comes to assessing our students in language education. I know that it's time, so I'll have to stop here. Thank you so much. I hope that I set the ball rolling for the conference. That was my main aim, and we'll start the discussion now in the rooms. Thank you.